Welcome everyone to the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, publisher of the Minden-Honeoye Falls-Lima Sentinel. We'll be bringing you fantastic topics each episode. Today we have a very special guest, and you'll be very happy to know what we'll be talking about. So join us in a moment as we start the State of Greater Western New York Report. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, as the announcer just said, and we'll be talking today to Margorie Byrnes. She's the Assemblywoman from the 133rd District of Western New York. She represents the area roughly southern Monroe County, Livingston County. Perhaps she can explain a little bit about that. So let's get started right away and just say hello, Assemblywoman Byrnes. How are we doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, let's just turn the ball over right to you and have you tell us a little bit about the State of the State address that you saw last night from the governor and what you thought about that.
I listened to the entire State of the State and also the budget address, which he did this week as well. And it certainly was very grandiose. Our state has a lot of needs. It has needs with housing, unemployment. He centered almost exclusively at the beginning about COVID, vaccinations, and the fact that really to get our economy going, to get our lives going, the first thing we really need to do is to defeat and overcome the COVID-19. And he went on from that to talk about a lot of specifics and some generalities. And some of those things that he mentioned, I thought had particular interest to the 133rd District. As you mentioned, I do represent Pittsford, Mendon, Rush, and Wheatland in the town or in the county of Monroe. I represent all of Livingston County. And in Steuben County, I also represent 5 towns, including Prattsburg, Dansville, Wayland, Cohocton, and Hornellsville, which is the city of Hornell. The reason I mentioned that is because sometimes when I'm talking to people in Upper Livingston and Monroe, they don't realize that I stretch to the southern tier, so that the issues that I'm looking at that affect my district can sometimes be a little broader than some of the ones that we look at in Monroe. One of the things that the governor specifically detailed in the State of the State, and he addressed it again in the budget, his budget address, was the fact that he wants to continue to expand green energy. And certainly we all want that as an objective, but sometimes the devil's in the detail. So it is important to look and understand how he is looking towards achieving some of his goals. One of the things that the governor mentioned was that he wants to accelerate a number of large electrical projects, electric generating projects, some of which have already begun, others are in the planning stages in the Western New York area. Approximately 100 projects, I believe, in all. Including the Horseshoe Project, which is in the towns of Caledonia and in Rush. It was specifically mentioned in the State of the State, the Livingston County / Monroe County project. The reason I mention it is he indicated that he wants to accelerate these programs. One of the things that I've been fighting for is to have local control, local input, so that people in our municipalities are able to express themselves and make sure whatever projects that we do as a state are projects not only that are good for the state, but they're also good for our communities. And that's why I think it's important to have local input and home rule on some of these projects, all of the projects, at least input. So what the governor indicated is that he wants to continue the process that we have now, which is total state control, no local rule, and that the energy would be generated upstate, but that they would be working specifically on electric lines in order to convey the electricity from upstate to downstate. there was no talk about how we can utilize the energy that we generate in our areas for our communities or to reduce our electric bills. It was all very clear that whatever we generate, if it's in the northern part of my district, there's a number of solar projects. In the southern part, when we start getting down into the Dansville Valley and the hills in Prattsburgh, it's wind projects. So, and wind turbines, which used to be about 500 feet tall. The new versions will be 700 feet tall. So they are definitely things that concern neighbors. And that's why I would like more input from our communities before we rush to create projects that may or may not be suitable for a given area. That was one thing. The other thing that he stressed that he wanted to work on telemedicine. And I'm absolutely a proponent of telemedicine. And the more we can utilize it, especially in this day and age where we need to do more and more over our computers, is, it is obviously very important. But it feeds into another thing that the governor talked about, and that was broadband and the importance of New York State, everybody in New York State being tied in to not only having accessible broadband, but also affordable broadband. And the governor talked, and it is an important subject, about the cost where some people spend hundreds of dollars a month in order to have adequate connections to appropriate internet service. But one of the things I was discouraged by is that he repeatedly referred to 98% of New Yorkers being accessible to internet. And I really do not believe that is the case. My experience through all the people who've contacted me, and I know we're going to talk about this later, so I just want to touch on it, is that that's not the case. And while it is very important that broadband be affordable, before it can be affordable, it needs to be accessible. So my push is still to make sure that we have accessibility as we partner with looking towards affordability. So those are just a few of the things that jumped out at me, in particular about my district, that I wanted to touch upon. My concerns overall with the state of the state and with the budget address is that as we enter into this budget cycle, we're already $15 billion in the hole. We don't know how much money we are or are not going to get from the federal government. The governor actually proposed two budget scenarios. One, if we get $6 billion from the feds, another if we get 15. So we really aren't sure where we're going on that. But the reality is we have a money crisis. We have a cost crisis. So there are probably going to have to be some serious cuts made. And my concern is that some of the things that the governor expressed, and I know that it's only the beginning of the budgetary process, but I just don't believe they're going to overall be affordable for our entire state given the economic climate. Thank you.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit more about this broadband issue, because I think that it's a combination of affordability and accessibility. I know that a number of, for example, Buffalo Bills fans who are in the Boston area could not watch the game on broadcast TV. There's a problem with NBC over there. They had to watch it on broadband. And I think it's not just businesses who are going to be concerned about broadband. It'll be individuals too, like you mentioned with telemedicine. So the idea of accessibility probably comes first before affordability. What's your gut feeling about accessibility, particularly in the region that you serve?
It was only a year ago that Livingston County did an entire survey in the county in order to determine the extent of the problem. We all believed there was a problem. They wanted to nail it down. And what they found was that there was a significant, and I'm just talking about Livingston right now, they did the survey. Jefferson County up in the North Country is now going to be doing their own survey. They found that it would be $30 million just to connect every residence unserved right now in Livingston County to appropriate broadband internet service. So, and they have applied for USDA grant for that purpose. But my experience and the phone calls we get are so heartfelt with people who have not been able to have their kids do their on-school learning because either they don't have internet or it keeps crashing because it's not powerful enough. People that were working from home during this pandemic that weren't able to appropriately engage in that, businesses that were trying to survive, or even ones even in the normal time that in some areas, even in Caledonia, where you want to run your business and be able to take a payment via a credit card online, and they have trouble sometimes connecting with the computer systems crashing. And it's things I've heard about, and it's not just in the rural areas. It's not just in the hills down in Prattsburg and in Dansville. I've had the monks at the Abbey call up to say that they don't have appropriate broadband to even run their store to buy monk's bread, and people who live on Awaka Trail in Mumford who are desperate. And what they'll talk about is that when they call up the companies, and that the companies will come so far on a road, they might stop for whatever reason, the end of a zip code, or we're not even sure why, at one pole, and then they won't go any farther. And when the person at the next house down the line says, I need to get hooked up too, what they tell them is, well, that'll be $20,000. You're not in the area that we serve. Well, they go to 100 feet away and they claim you're not in the area that we serve. And there are a lot of costs. Fiber optic, I'm told, is very expensive. And also a year ago, we added a fiber optic tax, which is even more of a burden on the rural areas. It's by the foot, so that if somebody wants to use a pole that hasn't been, it doesn't have fiber optic cable already on it, they have to actually pay by the foot a fee to the state to use the state right away to connect. And especially in the rural areas where these lines are quite long, it's really becoming cost prohibitive, excuse me. And I apologize, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just, you reminded me of something just before we lose the subject. So this sounds like what happened in the early 70s when cable came through our region. It was very costly for people to get who weren't on the main line, even if they could tap off of the main feed. So that's right. One thing it reminded me of. The second thing it reminds me of is the development of our roads network in the early 1800s. In the early 1800s, the state put together the road. I mean, the most famous locally being Route 5 and 20. It started off as a state project. They ended up turning it over to private interests when it became a turnpike before they got it back again. Now, are they talking in Albany about maybe looking at the high-speed broadband network in the same way that maybe we looked at the early road networks in the 19th century?
If my memory serves me, and that I think those, for the most part, were federal programs. And that's one of the reasons Livingston County has applied for grant money for $25 million from the USDA, is because other than the programs you cited, I also think is when our rural areas needed electricity, that it was the USDA that.
And we just dropped the line, so hopefully we can get her back. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. They are, if you're listening to the Zoom call, oh, there you are, you're back again. That's okay. This is one of those high-speed broadband issues.
I was going to say, it was all right on part of my screen. But anyway, I think this is substantially a federal issue. They were able to connect everybody with electricity back in rural areas, and we do hope that they're able to assist us on this as well. It's not totally, because back in 2015, Governor Cuomo, with the best of intentions, got $500 million in federal taxpayer money to go into the Broadband for All program, and the game plan was to have everybody in New York State connected by the year 2018. Clearly that hasn't happened. And while he touts a 98% connection rate, I think that just about every human being I talk to says that except the governor, says that is not true. And it's a lot more people than that. And it just don't want to acknowledge it. But in any event, it is a major issue. And another thing we have to look at too, that's emerging technology, is something called SpaceX. It may be a case of moving to low orbit satellites in order to help our more rural areas. Although we'd have to see how well it would work in the mountainous areas, because again, there are places where you can get direct TV or dish TV on satellite, and other areas that you can't, depending on your view of the satellite. So, I think that there's a lot to be tested and looked at. There are trial programs already going on for SpaceX, which I'm told are looking really good, although New York State right now is not part of the program or the test project.
One of the things you talked about was the numbers. I think 2%, if he's implying 2% of the people don't have access to the internet, that's right around 380,000 based on New York State population figures. Yet there's another figure in his own NewYorkState.gov website that says about 2 million people don't have practical access to it. So the numbers are a little bit confusing coming out of the governor's office, but I think that it's probably wise to say that more people don't have it or don't have access to it than maybe should, and practical access is more important. Again, we're talking not just about the ability to hook up, but the ability to hook up with high speed. There are private companies who can offer that right now. Again, it's just like you said, it's kind of prohibitive if you're off the main trunk. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge going forward. Are there any other sort of...
But it's imperative.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, if we see the evolution of content is going to be requiring this high-speed broadband, and it's just going to get more intense as we go on. Before we break, are there any other issues that you see that have an impact on our region that maybe people should be aware of, other than what you've mentioned before?
Oh, well, I just went blank, but I'm sure I'll think of something when we come back. Because really, there are so many issues that affect us. We've got to get our economy going so that our small businesses and our large businesses can get going. Although there is some good news. Down in Hornell, Alstom, who makes high-speed internets, trains, has gotten a phenomenal contract for the future.
Thanks. We actually don't have a break. One of the things that we have on this type of show is that we're going to go straight through. So we have, I'm just seeing if there's any questions from our audience, nothing that I could see right now. So I think that maybe one of the issues of interest is a business related, particularly small businesses. This is aside just from broadband, but small businesses in general. New York, what is New York doing to help promote small businesses, or contrapositively, what is the state doing that's really hurting small businesses?
Well, there's no question that a lot of the regulations have been harming our businesses, even pre-COVID. But I've always been a proponent that as much as we can do it safely and reliably, our businesses should be open, our kids should be playing sports, and we should be getting our world back to whatever we consider normal at this point. Even the governor, while using his different colors of zones, has closed certain areas at different times and put different restrictions on. Even he acknowledged in his State of the State and again in his budget address the importance of, notwithstanding the virus at this point, that it's imperative that we get our businesses open and that we move forward with our economy, because otherwise our state is crashing, financially and otherwise. And I really do think that this can be done safely, and I look forward to more and more restaurants and businesses being open.
We do have a couple of questions, and they're both on the same topic. I think you mentioned something earlier about other states, or perhaps maybe other states are doing some sort of initiatives with regards to expanding broadband. Are you aware of any specific details with regard to that?
I'm only aware that a company or a program called SpaceX has put satellites, that are in a low orbit, that are having an experimental program. I believe it's up in Canada. I believe it's above New York State. And all I was told by a number of individuals, including our IT people in Albany, is as well as a constituent who is very involved in that field, is that it appears to be very promising. Just generically, that's what they said.
And this is primarily a private initiative as opposed to a federal initiative, correct?
I honestly am not that familiar with the program.
Yeah, it sounds like what it involves is it involves less laying of cable, which may make it less expensive over the long haul. But it's a rather interesting thing. How about the idea of maybe approaching, I know this happened a few years ago with the city of Rochester and Google. Google was looking for some experimental cities where they would be willing to allow them to lay down 100 gigabyte broadband. Anything like that might be coming up, or that we should be aware of?
No, I have not heard of any further development or programs along that line at all. I really think at this point, let me go back a step. We see these television commercials about how 5G is coming, and all of our phones now, trade in your 4G phone, get the 5G phone, and it just kills me, because I just wish everybody at a base level had something before we keep jumping ahead. On the other hand, maybe with these new developments in different areas, if it's through a fiber optic cable, if it's through satellite, which apparently is more, can handle a better band than something like HughesNet. Maybe as we go along and as different programs are tried, successful or not, they open up corridors for other thought processes on what may work in a given area.
How about, what can people do if they want to promote this idea of encouraging New York State to invest more in high-speed broadband? Should they be contacting their local chambers? Should they be going to some department in Albany? I mean, obviously they can contact someone like you, and I'm assuming that they already have, but beyond their local assembly representative, who else can they contact, or how else can they go about doing this?
Well, again, your assembly members, your senators, the governor's office, because to a certain degree, substantial degree, the governor in his executive budget, while again, it isn't cast in stone and there will be changes made to it, it really is the broad outline that ultimately the budget will be crafted out of. So the governor's office, and also our federal representatives, congressmen, and US senators, because another thing that we're working on, and I think I had shared it with you previously, maybe not, is that the Republican Assembly members, we've written to the president, our congressmen and senators, asking for CARES Act money to be released. Because in earlier, well, I guess it's last year now, 2020, when the Federal CARES Act was passed, there were millions and millions of dollars that were allocated for things like learning at schools, telemedicine, updating broadband, and the FCC and rural utilities pilots. They're out there, millions of dollars for them. And we felt that, especially at the beginning, and the governor's correct, we took a huge brunt on the COVID-19. We were one of the first states to hit the hardest and take it the longest, that we really do believe that that money should be allocated. And even if we want to go back in 2017, New York State was awarded $170 million from the FCC, but only a little over 55 million has been received and used by New York State. So, I mean, there's 115 million out there that should be sent to us, and that can go a long way to taking some of our rural communities. If Livingston County can get totally hooked up for 30 million, that 170 million can go a long way and help us out. We want those monies released too, and we've written the federal government on that as well.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add to our audience that pertains to them or the greater Western New York region?
Well, you know, I've talked a lot about some of the rural issues, you know, and I know from talking to people also in Pittsford, Mendon, Honeyway Falls, you know, that they also do have problems of this nature with broadband. So it isn't strictly a rural issue. It is a municipal issue too. I know that the Monroe County Legislature is also looking at different avenues and different companies that can assist with Monroe County residents. And I think what we have to do is put all of our thinking caps on, take ideas. The first I heard about SpaceX was from a constituent who was sending me emails. So, you know, put all of our thinking caps on. Don't be afraid to look at what somebody else's idea was. And if their idea can work, we got to run with it, because this is just way too important. Everything we do almost right now is based upon our ability to be on a broadband. If it's on a laptop, a desktop, our iPhones, you know, there is not a thing that I think most of us do that doesn't require almost constantly looking at some type of electronic equipment that needs access to information. So, and from that is where our schools and the learning is going to come from, our business development. You know, so if you have to look at the base that everything is built off of, I really do think this is a primary issue. Obviously, anybody's welcome to call me at my office anytime. Much to a lot of people's surprise, I actually answer my own phone when I'm here. So you don't have to be afraid to reach out and call.
Well, I want to thank you for participating in this week's version of the State of Western New York report. And I would look forward to having you come back again when we have more news, maybe when we have the budget taken care of, and we'll be talking to you later. Thanks a lot, Assemblywoman Byrnes.
I really appreciate your time and all of your viewers. I can't thank them enough for caring in order to pay attention. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone here, for watching the Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa. We'll be seeing you next time on this same channel. Bye-bye for now.